the first one that we have is Joanna Faber. Now, how many people have ever heard of that book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen? A lot of people, yeah. So that was written by her mother, who lives in the same community where I live. And my mother was a friend of hers and the person she collaborated with, Maislish. And now her daughter has written a book, How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. And guess what? She's here. And she's going to talk about what it was like to be the subject of How to Talk So Kids Will Listen. So that should be interesting. She's also been a public school teacher for 10 years. She's got 3 kids that she's raised. She'll tell you all about it. Joanna Faber.
Hello. You're all in the darkness. A teacher once said to me, if I could choose the moment of my passing, it would be during a teacher training conference, because the transition from life to death would be imperceptible. But this conference seems different, and I hope to continue the trend and be lively enough so that we all survive the experience. When I went into teaching, I felt pretty confident. I mean, I got this, you know. My mother had written these books, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, How to Talk So Kids Will Learn. Both my parents had been teachers at one point or another in their lives. I grew up hearing all kinds of dramatic stories at the dinner table about their teaching escapades, and I had read books, inspiring books, you know, where teachers went into poor neighborhoods and did wonderful things with troubled kids, you know, including the great Jonathan Kozol. I had my teaching degree. I knew how to make an interesting lesson plan with hands-on activities and how to, you know, engage the kids' interest. So I was ready, and I strode in to PS 161 in West Harlem, whereupon the principal immediately suspended my special education bilingual resource room program on the first day and threw me into a kindergarten class that didn't have a teacher. You know, how hard could that be? 5-year-olds, right? And, you know, within minutes, they were running around, they were yelling, they were throwing things, they were jumping off desks and hitting each other, while I pleaded with them to sit down and listen, hopelessly pleaded. And then I went home and I cried. You know, it was a shock. You know, the reality of having to control these frankly crazy little people basically crushed my fantasy of what I would be like as this wonderful teacher. You know, I did go back because it would have been embarrassing not to. You know, I'd spent too many years saying I was going to be a teacher, and you know, there was rent. So I got better. I got better at it, which is not to say it became easy. But what I want to talk about is some of the skills that made an enormous difference to my survival. And we have to start with feelings, because the hard truth is kids can't act right when they don't feel right. You know, none of us can. So if we want them to behave better, we have to help them feel better. And the quickest way to do that is by accepting their feelings and not dismissing them. And really, let's face it, we're talking about negative feelings. Most of us don't have any problem accepting positive feelings. Like, oh, you like math? Maybe you'll grow up to be an engineer. You know, that's fun. You know, it's when a kid expresses a negative feeling that we run into trouble. You know, often our first instinct is to deny it, to explain to him why he shouldn't feel that way, you know, to give him advice. sometimes just to tell him he's being rude. It's not easy. I'm going to start with a story from way back, from early years of parenting. So here's what I said when my 3-year-old was playing with blocks and the 1-year-old sort of comes staggering up, the newly walking 1-year-old, and the 3-year-old takes the guarding position, and I can see what's about to go down. Is it echoey? Is the mic echoing? No? Okay, it's just in my head. I'm having a little trouble hearing myself talk back at myself, but I'll try to not listen to myself. So I say, Dan, let the baby have a few blocks. He just wants to play with you. No, I'm making something. Come on, Dan, you know how babies are. Just play with them for a minute. Dan is upon the blocks. A baby is upon the blocks. Dan shoves him, and he falls down wailing. What is the matter with you? Now you made the baby cry. Okay, so not quality time, for this stay-at-home mom. But the great thing about being a parent, and about being a teacher for that matter, is when you blow it, you always get another chance. You don't have to worry that the kids aren't going to misbehave ever again. So I had ample opportunity to practice. So here's me in a finer moment. Dan's guarding the box. Baby's approaching. No. Here's me acknowledging feelings. Oh no, here you are working on something special, and the baby's coming to grab it. How frustrating. Dan says, here. He tosses a handful of blocks at his feet, like a little magic circle there, and scoops his blocks up onto the table. Wow, you figured out what to do to make that baby happy. It's a radically different outcome. It could have been a lucky break. It needs more testing, right? But I wonder, why was it so hard to, acknowledge his feelings in this example the first time? Because I'm pretty sure that this desire to knock a sibling on his head over a few blocks is wrong. And I needed him to understand that right away and not indulge in this aggressive impulse, even for a second. But it was only by showing him respect for his strong feelings about his work that he was able to think clearly and move past aggression. In the first instance, he had to defend against his brother and against his mother. Here's another early time story that was memorable enough. Well, I wrote it down. Let's face it, my memory's not that good. Now little Sam, the baby, is now 3 years old, and he got as a present these little sponge eggs you drop in warm water and they open up into animals. Does anyone still have this? Yes, okay. Well, he's decided he's going to hatch one a day, which isn't easy for a 3-year-old, and he drives me crazy asking, is it the next day yet? Is it the next day yet? But he perseveres, he sticks to his plan, and on the 3rd day, these 2 little horses come out attached by the noses. And, I need this to be good because we've waited 24 hours for this event. So I say, oh, look, honey, it's a mommy and a baby horse. No, it's not. You can't even see their faces. Yes, you can. See, they're kissing. I don't like them. Now I'm getting desperate. I could draw their noses on with a pen. I will never like them. Foolishly, I persist. I could cut them apart with a scissors so their faces would be easier to see. I will never like them. They are bad. Finally, I see the light. Something about the volume switched my vision on. Oh, I see. You don't like how their faces are mushed together. Sam stops crying. Yeah, I'm gonna play with the penguins instead. So why did I have such a hard time acknowledging his feelings this time? Why did it take me so long? You know, I just desperately wanted to make better. I want to protect my child from disappointment. You know, I want to protect myself from his disappointment, right? Who wants a wailing 3-year-old? But he just as desperately needed his disappointment to be heard before he could move on to happier feelings. So, you know, I think we do this automatically. We discourage angry emotions, we protect against sad emotions, we dismiss what we see as trivial emotions, because to acknowledge them seems counterintuitive. Listen to the difference between what we want to say and what a kid needs to hear. So when a child says, you know, this homework's too hard, what do we want to say? We want to say, oh no, look here, it's easy. Here, I'll help you. Well, let me tell you, no child ever took heart in the knowledge that what he is struggling to do is actually easy. You know, and even if he does achieve it, what does he achieve? Something easy. It will actually give him more courage to face the task if we say, oh my gosh, all those long division problems, that looks like it could drive a person crazy. You know, that's what will give him the strength to go on. When she says, I don't want to sing in the show, you know, there's always that kindergarten show around Thanksgiving time. You know, we want to reassure her. Oh, you'll do fine. There's nothing to worry about. You have a beautiful voice. Well, you know, were you ever nervous about something, you know, had real knots in your stomach, and have a friend tell you, oh, there's nothing to worry about? Like, did it make you feel better? Yeah, right? You know, it will give her more courage to get on that stage if you can accept the feeling and say, boy, it can be scary to get up on a stage and sing in front of a whole crowd of people. So when a 4-year-old wails, I lost my favorite Lego guy, you know, you want to say, oh, please, how many times have you been told not to take your toys to school? And besides, you have zillions of those pesky little vacuum hazards. And got one stuck in my foot the other day. It'll help him recover from his sadness more quickly if you can say, oh, so that one was really special to you. You know, the one with the little helmet and the sword and the ruby. You know, when a 5-year-old says, I hate Jerry, I'm gonna punch him in the nose. What's our first impulse? You know, don't you dare. Or perhaps, that's not nice. That would make Jerry feel bad. You know, to which he may respond, at least in his mind, you know, well, I hope it makes him feel bad. I mean, I'm mad at him. If punching him made him feel good, I'd have to kick him. So, you know, if you want to de-escalate the situation, it's going to be more effective if you can accept the feeling. Boy, you sound really angry with Jerry right now. Something he did annoyed you. The great John Gottman, a researcher in child psychology who I believe has spoken at one of these conferences in the past, he did a study and he compared 2 groups of parents. And one group he called emotionally dismissive, you know, parents who either ignored their children's negative feelings or became irritated or angry with them for expressing negative feelings. You know, you're wrong to feel that way, you're foolish, you're being too oversensitive, you're overreacting. And the other group he called emotional coaches, parents who would acknowledge their kids' feelings and help them identify what they were feeling, like, oh boy, that could be upsetting, or that looks frustrating, or how disappointing. And the results were astonishing. He found that children whose feelings were identified and accepted had an enormous advantage. They had longer attention spans, they did better on achievement tests, they got along better with their peers, their teachers, their parents, they were more resistant to infectious diseases, even their urine was superior. They had fewer stress hormones in their urine. So, you know, forget about test scores. If you want your kids to have superior pee, accept their feelings. So I guess I should give a classroom example, and I'll continue to skew young, but if you want examples of older kids through high school, I'll throw that in if we have time. You know, sometimes this seems more well-suited to a one-on-one relationship. So here's one story from a preschool teacher who was in one of my workshops, who said, you know, I didn't think I could do this with a big group, but, you know, because I didn't think I had time. But sometimes the long way is actually the shorter way. She said, Sean, 4 years old, came in all excited about his birthday party, and he said, and David is not invited. And David, who was sitting next to Sean, started to well up in tears. Sean, I said, you're hurting David's feelings. Well, David cannot come to my party, he yelled even louder. David struck out at Sean and had to be dragged away by the teacher's aide. Sean, I said, stop it. You can't say that. I don't want David to come to my house ever again. David started screaming and flailing to get back at Sean. Then finally I remembered about acknowledging feelings. I took Sean aside and said, it sounds to me like you're really angry at David. Yeah! He bit me! Oh, that must have hurt. It did. Oh. The problem is right now, David feels really sad. Well, he can come to my birthday party. David, you can come to my party. She said, these are her words, as soon as I listened to his grievance and accepted his feelings, he was able to move on. I was amazed. And these are my words. You notice that every time she denied the feeling, he got louder. And when you accept the feeling, you get to find out more about what really happened. So it's a little side benefit. One way to accept a child's feeling, especially when he wants something that he cannot have, is to give the child in fantasy what you cannot give in reality. A teacher in one of my workshops reported that she had a kid who was very upset that they were out of chocolate milk at lunchtime. She tried telling him it wasn't that big a deal. He would survive without chocolate milk for one afternoon. The kid started yelling, "No, I won't." Then she said, you know, I wish I had a magic wand and I could make chocolate milk appear. How much would you like, a cup or a gallon? Or, you know, I would say, how about a swimming pool? You know, when you're giving in fantasy, you don't have to be cheap. You know, you could just loll around in a lake of chocolate milk and let it slosh into your mouth whenever you're thirsty. At any rate, the kid laughed and took a regular milk. It seems like that particular skill would be more suited to a younger child, but I found myself using it with an older child at the end of a trip to the Bronx Zoo. And if any of you are teachers and have ever taken a class on a trip in New York City, you know that it's a very stressful experience. You know, you spend the whole time counting heads and making sure, you know, nobody, you know, ended up in the alligator moat. And, you know, there's some kids who want to run ahead, and there's some kids who want to stay behind, and some kids who have to go to the bathroom, and some kids who are hungry. So when I got the entire class back to the bus on this hot June day, I was drained and exhausted and triumphant. And then Maximo, a sullen 6th grader, crossed his arms when everyone was supposed to be getting into the bus, and he said, I ain't going. And my first impulse was to say, you ain't going? Well, then you ain't going on any more class trips. Just see if I take you anywhere, ever again. But Maximo was bigger than me. So I knew I had to dig deep and use a skill. So I said, "Wow, Maximo, you really like the zoo. If it were up to you, we wouldn't be leaving at 2 o'clock. We'd be staying till dark. Heck, I bet you'd like to stay all night. You'd curl up with the polar bears." And Maximo looked at me and he said, "Huh." And then he got on the bus. But the funny thing about that is, what was really interesting to me is that as I was using this skill in a manipulative way, I actually felt myself transforming, because as I was acknowledging his strong feelings about staying at the zoo, I stopped seeing him as a sullen kid. I started realizing that this trip was so special to him. It was the first time, and possibly the only time, that he's going to get to go from West Harlem all the way down to the Bronx Zoo, and he didn't want it to end. He had appreciated it. So it helped me feel a connection with him as well. In short, children depend on us, on parents and teachers, to name their feelings and not dismiss them. If we don't, our unspoken messages, you don't mean what you say, you don't know what you know, you don't feel what you feel, you can't trust your own senses. Jamal talked about valuing kids' ideas. I think this is sort of the pre-step to value their feelings. And we're also laying the groundwork for a person who can respect other people's feelings and not dismiss them. We're always asking kids, think about how the other person feels. That's not going to happen unless we can start by thinking about how they feel. But we all know it's not just about feelings. We have to get kids to do stuff. And there's just a really long list of things that we parents and teachers are obsessed with that kids have absolutely no interest in. Like we obsess about time, like can't be late, kids don't care about time. They don't care about late. We obsess about cleanliness. We want them to wash their hands. What kid cares? And sometimes you find yourself going through the day, it feels like a series of unpleasant conflicts. It seems to us that the most efficient way to get a kid to do something is by telling them, put the toy down, keep your hands to yourself, get your coat on. No, not later, now. Sometimes for a little extra flair, we add a threat, which of course we call a natural consequence. If you throw sand one more time, you're going to be in timeout. And the problem with that is the child doesn't hear the whole sentence. What she hears is, throw sand one more time. So the threat becomes an irresistible challenge. I remember recently being in a library and seeing a sign over a pile of books, all in capital letters, said, "Do not touch these books," with several exclamation points. And I knew why. I'm a grown-up. They probably hadn't put the tags and the numbers in them yet. But as I walked by, I touched the books. I was just compelled. They're not the boss of me. Keeping in mind that kids have the same resentful feelings that we adults get when people order us around, we have to consider other options. And there are many, but for the purposes of this mini talk, I'm just going to do 2, but I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of ways in my workshop, which is, I have to say, is on the schedule for Saturday, but is actually going to be on Friday at 2 o'clock if you want to come. The schedule is wrong. So, just to give you a taste, for younger children, it's a safe bet. most younger children love play. So playfulness is the world they live in. And, often parents and teachers don't feel playful. They're like, what do you mean? What are you even talking about? What do I do? So I would say, first tip, safe bet that for a younger child, making an inanimate object talk will win the day. So instead of like, stop squirming while I got your shoe on, you can say, oh, I feel so flat and empty, won't somebody put a foot in me? And all of a sudden you're going to have a cooperative child. A mom in my workshop used to have these epic battles with her child about cleaning up blocks. And at one point she found herself stuffing the blocks into his hand and wrapping his finger around them and then pushing his hand into the block bag and then prying his fingers off the blocks to force him to clean up, because it had become a moral issue. But it wasn't efficient. So, she tried making the block bag talk. I'm hungry, feed me blocks. And all of a sudden, the blocks are being stuffed in there. Like, I like green ones. They taste like broccoli. No, not the pink ones. They make me vomit. Here, more pink ones. It's just nicer. Another way to be playful is to make something into a challenge or into a game. I had one teacher recently tell me that for cleanup time, she would play music very slowly, and everyone had to put things away slowly, and then very quickly, and then freeze, and then slowly again. And every single child in that room wanted to help clean up, and there were no more threats and no more punishments and no more you're losing recess time for every minute you don't clean up. And hey, it's a way of life. How do we face an unpleasant task? We make it a pleasant task. But we're not always in the mood for whimsy, and the one more technique I'll talk about now is a very simple one of when you have the urge to rap out an order, if you can convert it into a choice, substitute a choice for a command, because the command makes a child feel helpless and defiant, and the choice gives them a little leeway and invites them to think a little and participate. So instead of, recess is over, line up now, you can say there are two ways to come in from recess. You can come in forwards, or you can come in backwards. Or both eyes open, or one eye shut. Or you can hop in like a kangaroo, or glide in like you're on roller skates. I guarantee you'll have full participation. Ideally, when offering a choice, both options should be acceptable to both parties. So, you don't want to say, you can do your work now or you're off of the trip to the zoo. That's a threat. That's not a choice. You don't want to say, you can get on the bus or I can leave you here for the wild dogs to chew on. You decide, honey. Don't pollute the idea of choice. One father said, I tell my son, I can spank you with my right hand or my left hand. It's up to you. Which brings me to the last topic that I'm going to touch on in this mini talk, which is alternatives to punishment. And we all know that kids can get you so angry, so resentful, and so frustrated that the urge to punish is hard to resist. You've read the book, you've studied the book, now you want to hit them with the book. So, but I do know children can be raised without punishment, because I, a self-avowed non-homicidal maniac, was raised without being punished, as were my brothers, and I raised my own children without punishing them. And I propose to you that if you have more than one child in the house, you will soon see the folly of punishment, as I did one day when I became frustrated with the fact that my son Dan kept poking his little brother in the head, no matter how carefully I explained to him that this was not a pleasant sensation. So finally I said to him, Dan, I have to show you what this feels like. And then I poked him in the head, hard. And then I said, did you like that? And he cried, no. And I said, okay then, don't do it to your brother. Point made. About an hour later, I heard the kids in the other room. I heard Dan's cool little voice saying to his brother, "Sammy, I have to show you what this feels like." Hysterical wailing from Sam. Okay, wrong point made. But, you know, it is kind of stunning how much our kids do emulate us. You know, they do what we do, not what we say. And they focus on the big picture. You know, our strategies are remembered and internalized long after any specific infraction is gone. So, you know, keeping this in mind, we have to decide, how do we want our kids to approach conflict? You know, do we want them to approach by thinking about what they should do to the other person? You know, how to take something away or inflict pain? Or do we want them to think, what can I do to solve this problem? And then the other relevant point is, what do we want them to think and feel when they've done something wrong? Do we want them to focus on their, you know, what TV show they're going to miss? Or, you know, how resentful they are at being grounded? Or do we want them to think about how to make it better, how to fix the mistake, what to do next time? You know, Dr. Gannat, my mother's mentor, would say that the problem with punishment is it actually encourages selfishness. It's a distraction from the problem. It deprives the child of facing up to his misdeeds and encourages him to focus on himself instead. So one tool we can reach for before reaching for punishment is called problem solving. So, you know, the idea is now, instead of working against each other, you're working with each other. You're harnessing the extremely powerful will of your child for good rather than evil. So, with problem solving, you always start with acknowledging feelings, which is what puts you on your child's side. If people want to skip that step and jump right in, but you can't, because it won't work. And then you describe the problem and request ideas for solutions. So on the simplest level, I first tried this when my son was barely, not very verbal, at 2.5. It's a pretty verbal method, but I was kind of desperate. He was riding his trike around in the kitchen because it was rainy outside and we have a gritty, gravelly, muddy, unpaved driveway, which was fine. And the problem was, he only wanted to ride around wherever I put down baby Sam, who was trying to learn to crawl. He wanted to ride right around him. And I kept telling him, you know, Dan, not so close to the baby. Dan, watch out for his little fingers. Dan, I'm going to have to take it away if you keep doing that. Dan was unfazed by my threats and warnings. And, you know, I didn't want to take it away, because then what was I going to do with him? You know? So I thought, I'll try something new, nothing to lose here. So I said, Dan, I can see you really enjoy riding your bike in the kitchen, and Sammy's enjoying watching you. Dan smiles. That was the acknowledging feelings part. Then I said, my problem is, I'm worried about the tricycle wheels coming too close to his little fingers and hurting him. That was the describing the problem part. We need an idea. Danny said, Danny, ride over here. And he switched to the other side of the kitchen. And I felt like God had invented light. You know, my terrible 2-year-old was willing to cooperate as long as he could be the idea man. And Danny have an idea became one of his favorite phrases. I see that you're standing, which means I'm out of time. I want one last story, and then I'll say it really fast, because it's a classic story. It's the classic Cain and Abel story. 2 brothers. Dustin's 6, Gavin's 2. This was somebody from my workshop. Dustin's making a birthday card for his dad, and the 2-year-old comes and scribbles on it, and Dustin goes, poof, and Gavin falls on his head and wails, and Mom says, I know Gavin's annoying you right now, but you can't push and hurt him. He's your brother. Dustin scribbles on his card with angry marks and yells, I don't care. He runs upstairs to his bedroom and slams the door. So Mom calms down Gavin, and she goes up to do her workshop homework. That's That's the beauty of being in a workshop. Like, it's an opportunity, right? And she says to him, it can be frustrating to work with a 2-year-old around. We need some ideas for how to solve this problem. Well, Dustin is still mad. He's glowering. He won't look at her. He's not having it. So Mom says, well, I'll go first. How about for number 1, lock Max up in the dog crate? A big smile spreads over Dustin's face. And he says, put in number 2, but leave it blank because I'm not going to tell you. So she writes number 2. It's a little weird, but this is how it actually went. Then he says, put for number 3, I could work in my room. Number 4, I could lock myself in the bathroom to work. 5, Gavin could play outside. 6, Gavin could watch his Peter Pan video. Then Mom says, let's see what we want to cross out and what we want to keep. We can't lock a boy in a dog crate, so let's cross that out, says Dustin. Gavin can't play outside alone because he could fall in the water. They agree that the other items should be checked, and then Dustin says, now do number 2. Remember number 2? He says, right, I won't push Gavin. He was ready. His mom wrote it. He went downstairs, got a fresh piece of paper, and went to his room to make a birthday card for his father. Last page. Now, what would have happened in a typical scenario? Maybe the kid spanked, he sent to timeout. What would he be thinking? Gee, I realize I should show a lot more love and tenderness for my brother. After all, we do share genetic material. You know. It's unlikely. It's unlikely. He'd probably be up there seething with resentment. You know, it's not fair. I hate him. He's always ruining everything. Mom always takes his side. I'm mean. You know, so how much better is this? It was a difficult problem, but I figured it out. I figured out a solution. Next time I won't have to hurt him. Mom's not mad at me. She's proud of me. So when you use a skill like this one, in place of punishment, you're truly modeling the attitude we want our kids to take towards conflict in their lives as children and as grown-ups. Not, I'm a failure because something didn't work out, but what should I try next? You know, and even before a child becomes an adult, you find that there's not much future in punishment. You know, kids grow bigger, and it's pretty hard to manhandle a teenager who's, you know, towering over you. But their ability to problem solve only grows greater as they get older. And not only that, most of their behavior is going to occur outside of your sphere of influence. And you really can't control them. You need to rely on your emotional connection, the mutual respect, the ability to listen and care about each other's feelings and work out solutions. And the larger message is, when there's conflict between us, we don't have to mobilize our forces against each other. We can spend our energy searching for a solution that respects the needs of all parties. And the children, the students, are not passive. They're active participants in solving problems. And wouldn't that be nice for the whole world? And now I'll give you Dr. Ganot's word. I'll end with a sentence from Dr. Ganot, my mother's mentor. You know, I realize some of you are probably thinking nobody could do this stuff all the time. And Dr. Ganot used to say, you don't have to be orthodox, you can be reform. We aim for 70%, some days 50% is all we can manage, and even 10% can make a real difference in a relationship. Thank you.
That was great. Okay.
Okay.
There's no time for questions, but guess what? Joanna is doing a workshop tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. So you can go to her workshop tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Plus, I hope that she's as funny in her book as she was in person. She's got some books out there for sale, and I think you got a few more if we run out of them, right?
I have some in the car.
Some in the car, so. Okay, thank you, Joanna. That was great. Okay, the next mini talker, this is really quite an interesting story. So we have Joanna, who's here from around the block, basically, grew up in the same community, you know, 10 minutes away. And we have someone else who's on the other side of the world who came here. One of the people who was in my school starters class and started her school and a bunch of other programs, Jane Macdonald.
New. You take a risk, don't you, going from one country to another, because you don't know what bits to take.
You need help setting that up?
Would you happen to have an HDMI thingy? I don't know what they're called. Cable. Joanna, you described my 5-year-old. She says to me, but my idea, and then she turns into tears, but my idea. And I'm trying to get her into the car to get to kinder, you know. So I try not to negotiate too much, and I try to acknowledge she's got an idea and that maybe we can do it later, and that usually works for her. I was going to show you something on my laptop, which is my school's website. It's simply... Oh, could I give it a try? Yeah, thanks, Richard. That would be great. But we'll see. Richard's idea is a very good idea. It may or may not work.
We might need somebody to
Got that there.
balance that one.
No worries. It saves me from being stuck behind that, so that's not a bad thing. If you would like to have a look at our project, it's called A School of Cultural Creativity. We are in Melbourne. We're just outside Melbourne in a Yarra Valley, it's called. It's a large, very artistic community who have got great interests in sustainability and the arts and crafts and alternatives across the whole. I'm a creatologist, which means that I research the nature and the power of creativity. I started a master's degree about 10 or so years ago in sustainability and social change, and I went into that degree with the question, I was going through a bit of an idealistic kind of disenchanted phase of my life, and I wanted to study in the master's how you actually create heaven on earth, and my supervisor said, can't do that. And I went, why not? And he said, well, give it a try. So I started defining heaven and I started defining earth and realised he had a point. You just can't do it. So instead of doing that, I focused on the word creativity, how to create heaven on earth. And I figured, well, there might be something in that. And I haven't stopped. And it's because of that research that our school was born. Now, I don't have my glasses with me, which is always the way. The School of Cultural Creativity that we've built is a school that is a fusion of creative education and democratic education. So we learn literally through the creative process, and I believe that we're the first school in Australia to do it. There are a lot of schools that are taking up project-based learning and inquiry-based learning. Some of them community-based, some of them studio-based and collaborative-based, but we're effectively full-time project-based learning. And one of the ways in which we do this and the ways in which we're structuring it is through multi-age class groups, and it's through community mentoring, as a lot of us have talked about. It's through student self-evaluations. It's through the students self-governing and self-regulating, creating their own individual education programs that we help them to assess. We have gotten to a point now where we are registering a primary school to open at the beginning of next year, hopefully. We have a farm school for preschoolers because we're set on a farm, and we have a program called The Tribe, which is for home and unschooled children who are in primary, aged years of their lives. And the governing body of those 3 programs is the actual School of Cultural Creativity itself. So in Australia, in order to register a school, we need to be some form of non-for-profit organisation. So we're a registered company, limited by guarantee, which puts us in the non-for-profit bracket. So we've got a board and a working committee, and we're also a registered charity. So the next big step for us was to register this primary school, and we've just submitted registration, and a huge registration application for that, and we'll be learning more about that assessment over the next few weeks. So a little bit nervous about it, but that's all right. There are 3 reasons why we're building the school. The first reason is that we're really concerned about the social and ecological issues that our children are effectively born into, that we're all aware of. We're worried that by the time they finish school, they may not have the capacity to be able to enter into their adult lives with the ability to be able to affect change within those issues, within those problems. Some of you might have heard the definition or the meaning of a wicked problem or a super wicked problem. And those 2 things effectively refer to problems that are not solvable by academia and that are usually only solved by effectively grassroots movements. So by people, a large number of people changing their behaviour. We figure that we're doing our little bit in our own personal lives, but if we can educate our children to be problem solvers, to be collaborators, to be project-based learners, that these skill sets that they can take throughout the rest of their lives, then they will be able to create their enterprises that have got social and ecological value sets embedded in them, and that they will be able to create beautiful relationships with their partners and their children, and that they'll be able to go on to create their homes and whatever it is that they choose at any time in their lives. The second reason why we're wanting to build the school is because we have got a number of children in our region who struggle in mainstream, just like you would have here. And these children, their needs are significant, and I'll discuss them in a little while. The third reason is, and I really wish I had my glasses, oh yeah, the third reason is this. I've been a teacher for a really long time, and I've been in and out of classrooms for a long time as a visiting teacher, and I have seen this. You know, the kids that are just, they're up the back. In their minds, they're having this dialogue, and in Australian lingo, it goes like this: whatever, I don't care about it, I don't understand what the point is, it's not going to mean anything to me, I can't do it anyway, you're asking me to do something that is all about you, it's got nothing to do with me, I'd rather be somewhere else. When does school finish? And we don't want that experience for our kids. We want something else for the kids that come to our school, all the children that live around the world actually, but we want the kids that are entering our program to feel like this. I did it, I got it, that internal, woohoo, you know, that transcendental feeling that you have when you just nailed something. No one else needs to know about it, but you just get that little, you know, you get your thing on. And it's a rewarding, deeply, profoundly satisfying feeling that we often experience in secret. The empathy that we have for the kids that are in class doing this is really great, because we know that they're falling behind, we know that they're not engaged, and we know that they're probably in some kind of emotional pain, and they don't have the freedom in their space to express it. So the children that are experiencing that kind of feeling are the children who are looking bored, you know, they are looking disinterested, they're disengaged, they're probably looking disrespectful, they're probably looking disobedient, and their educators often feel that there's no further course other than a disciplinary one. So often these kids get to a point where they're, you know, taken to the principal's office, parents are called, suspension is on the cards, expulsion is on the cards, and then they go to alternative environments where the kids love it. My parents I remember my father used to say to me, I was one of those kids, by the way, in school, like a lot of us probably were, and my father used to say to me, Jane, if you don't apply yourself, we're going to send you to the local public school where they had the most awesome arts program. They had this huge auditorium, it was like the first of its kind in Melbourne, and they did theatre and drama, and the arts were just... The girls were walking around with odd socks and pink streaks in their hair, whereas I was at a convent school with a poo brown uniform and a collar sticking out to here. So what did I do? Misbehaved like you wouldn't believe. And I never got to go to that school. But that was okay, because staying where I was actually taught me a good lesson, and that was that if I still pursued my thing, at least I would get somewhere. If I still stayed true to what it was that I wanted, at least I would get somewhere, even if someone else had a say on that path. I wanted to be an artist, I wanted to be a photographer, and instead of that, I went down the path of teaching, much more safe and secure, and it was. But it led me to here. I did photography years later, but it led me to here. It led me to a place where I could then begin something for someone else. Now, I've mentioned creativity a couple of times, and the reason is, it's because creativity has got this ability, it has a power to help each of us, all of us, humankind, to get to the point where we have that gorgeous shining feeling about us, where we are authentic, and we talk about that a lot today. We're being authentic, we're true to ourselves, we're expressing our feelings, we're not holding back, we're stepping into something that is important to us. We're not in an environment that imposes itself upon us. We're not being judged. And that feeling is so important in order for the children that are being self-directed in our educational system, in our educational classes, because they're following this light that they have within them, and teaching them how to do that, teaching them how to take that step into life and to trust that feeling, trust that deep, profound, it goes almost beyond intuition, is so important. If that's their lesson, then, you know, socially, ecologically, who knows the impact that they're going to have when they reach early adult life. Having said all that, that environment, in order to be able to encourage our children to shine up like that, that environment needs to be conducive. There was a study done recently, it's on our website, that refers to the culture of any environment, including the home environment. Children who believe that they will be punished for being creative in the classroom will not be creative. And there was something I wanted to say on that and it slipped my mind, but I'll come back to it, I'm sure it will pop in. So, in order for us to be able to create this gorgeous environment, I would love to think that by the end of a conference like this, we're able to refer to that more academic environment as one, and what we're working in, this other domain over here, is the creative environment. If we were to work in this creative environment, we could increase our knowledge about creativity. I don't believe it would hurt. In fact, I believe that if we all learned a little bit more about creativity, even if it were just as a subject, and it's as a subject that I've studied this for the last 10 or so years, then there is a great gift in that we can offer our children. If we can teach them a little bit about being more conscious about creativity and about how creativity works, even a little bit of creativity theory, while we're actually educating them, asking them about, you know, using words like inspiration and you know, that sense of authenticness, and, you know, are you being true to yourself and all the rest of that's fine, but literally discussing process with them. Literally discussing and bringing it back to the child, encouraging them to reflect upon all sorts of issues that occur within the creative process, including hitting glass ceilings and having to overcome obstacles and all the rest of it. It's a different form of learning. Learning through the creative process is very different. And if they are going to continue that journey throughout the rest of their lives, as we all do, then learning a little bit more consciously about our most natural teacher could be something that we offer them. And if we do offer them that, it's my belief that we could understand 3 things about creativity that will help us get us over the line. The first thing about creativity that I would like to suggest to you is its fundamental principle. Creativity's fundamental principle is to generate new life and new growth everywhere. People say, I'm not creative. And I say, well, were you generated in a woman's womb? And yes. Well, were you created by the creative process? Yes. Well, how is that not within you? There's this new life and new growth. It's designed to help us to change our inner condition within ourselves, within our belief sets, our knowledge, whatever it might be, and our outer world as well. And it does that through our skill sets. Creativity is a natural teacher. It is intendedly designed that way. That is the definition of a purpose, something that is intendedly designed. If that's creativity's intention, to create new life and new growth, then I have a flip question, and that is, who intendedly designed it that way? The second thing to know about creativity is that the way in which it functions, the way in which it fulfills its purpose, the modes of action by which it fulfills its purpose, is three. One of them is reciprocity, one of them is resourcefulness, and the other one is responsibility. If you step into the creative process, it will reciprocate. It will meet you halfway. It will say, yeah, baby, I'm here. What can I do for you? If you need time, for example, I don't have time for it. I want to do this project, I want to run my business, I don't have time for it. Step into it, see what happens with time. It's called time conscientisation. We can slow it down and we can speed it up. If we're in our creative process, it speeds up, time speeds up. But when we're reflecting back on it, our time slows back down again. There is plenty of time. The more time that we put into our creative work, whether it's as educators or in our private lives or in the classroom, we do create time. Money comes, people come, connections come. All of our resources are attainable as long as we've stepped in. Creativity is reciprocal. The other thing it does is that it has this ability to respond. Its third function is an ability to respond to us. And I don't know how that works. It just does. It agrees. It's almost as though it agrees. And if it doesn't, and I talk about it as though creativity is its own thing. That's how I see it. It is a power and it has its own nature. So it has this desire to respond to us as long as we take a step into it. Then there are three gifts that it gives us, and we experience this with our children, and we also experience this in ourselves. If we enter the creative process, we're enlightened about something. We become enlightened. We learn new knowledge. I had no idea how to start a school. I just wanted to. So I take a step into the process. The process says, yeah, sure. And I go, okay, well, what next? And it says, well, what do you want? Because it doesn't tell you. It doesn't impose itself like us educators or parents can. It just asks questions. And I go, okay, well, I think I need to speak with Jerry because I've heard that he does his school starters course and that might actually be of help. Hey, Jerry, what do you reckon? Oh, yeah, sure, sign up today and we'll get you started. I did his course twice and it was fabulous. I started 2 schools. This is my 2nd. It's all by question. So I became enlightened. Every step along the way, I could only see so far down the track, because you can see your destination, but it's like a runway. The lights that are here, they're nice and close to you, they're bright, you can see those steps, but they begin to fade. So I did not know what was going to happen further down the track, and to be frank, I still don't. But where I am is a lot further along the track than where I was, but all I did was just follow that light. It said, okay, take this step, and now take this step. So I become enlightened along the way in terms of my knowledge and my skill set. The second gift that it gives is a sense of efficiency and effectiveness. So I can approach someone, maybe a philanthropic partner, and say, listen, we need $1.5 million, and the first partner will go, yeah, right, see you later. And I'll go and ask someone else and I'll say, hey, listen, we're building a school for kids that need a more creative approach in their education, and we're looking for a donor. And he goes, okay, well, what do you need me for? Well, I'm kind of hoping, that you might be offering. That approach doesn't work either. So, but I'm becoming more efficient, more effective as I go along. So I come along to the third one. Hey, my name's Jane, we're really struggling to get money. We've got all these kids and they need something that they can't get anywhere else. And we need 1.5. Yeah, sure, when do you need it by? So, having said that, that hasn't happened yet, but I'm becoming more efficient and more effective as we get there. The third thing that creativity gives us is empowerment. And we were talking about that earlier this morning, this afternoon. This great sense of empowerment. I am able. I don't have to doubt myself. Plath, I can't remember the person's first name, is quoted as saying that self-doubt is creativity's #1 killer. And it really is. There's this sense of, and I know the words, I can't do it. I can't do it. And creativity goes, really, what evidence do you have of that? I go, well, I believe I can't. Well, what evidence do you have of that? Well, and there's no escaping it, in effect. So there is a sense that it builds your power, it builds your self-esteem, it builds confidence, it builds this ability, particularly within these young, beautiful people of ours, to voice, to say, hey, how about this? To apologise and to collaborate and to be kind to each other and to be brave in what it is that is calling them into it. When we talk about self-directed learning, there's this light that's within them, that it has got a marker on that child like it has with all of us. We've all got a calling, all of our children have got a calling, it's got a marker giving them the opportunity to explore all that. Is where creativity really steps up, because it says, I will empower you as long as you enter into me. My door is open, the invitation is here. It does not say you will, and you will do this assessment, and it will be done in this way, and it's due then, and it's by my criteria, and blah, blah, blah. It is only questioning, it doesn't impose. So this is us. There. Because we're growing, you might be interested to see how we're growing over time. So feel free to take a look at us. And if you know of things, informational programs or people doing stuff, whether it's in the creative field or the educational field, we'd love to link in with you and with those people, because that's how this was started in the first place. What Jerry did for me was to help me work out the non-negotiables of our school. We've just opened for enrolments for next year, and we've got 58 enrolments. We had a meeting last Friday with quite a number of families. We had 80 families, new families come, so our enrolments for next year came up. But this is what I want to show you here. This is how we're different. So we facilitate learning through the creative process. We're a democratic school. One of the beautiful things about incorporating the creative process in children's learning is that democracy is almost essential. We practice creativity through the self. So we self-govern, we self-motivate, we self-discipline, we self-evaluate. If you are doing a work that is creative or artistic, you'll understand what I mean. And we do get to a point where something is realised, but it's within the self that it's realised. Something is self-realised. In a democratic environment, if we're in an educational environment, if we're applying the creative process, it has to be democratic, because the self flips into a community. So we are communally governed, communally disciplined, communally evaluative, communally realised. And in that way, we get to really fulfil our charter of giving these children every opportunity that we can to experience their creative natures. We're inquiry-based because we're a creative process school, therefore we are self-directed. The children have individualised learning programs, like I mentioned before. We're multi-age. We have compulsory literacy and numeracy classes, and we'll be running those quite academically, because I believe that there does have to be a balance between the academic and the creative. The compulsory literacy classes will still be geared at topic and at skill level, so those classes will still be multi-age, but it gives the children this experience of the academic environment. For some, it will really work for them. We don't want to be saying that this doesn't, that it's off the cards for some of them. What else can I suggest to you? One last thing, that third last comment there is founded upon the best global principles and practices in creative ed. This is ongoing research, and it's my own private, we talk about passion projects, it's my passion project. Learning about creativity is my passion. And I'm writing a book about it. It'll be finished in about 1,500 years, but we're getting there. And 48,000 words, but it's a mess. But the point is that I'm researching as we go, and the school only benefits from that. Coming here, especially so far away from home where I've left my children behind, and had 3 nights in Manhattan by myself, and it was wonderful. But coming here and researching here and learning from you and being able to offer hopefully something of value to you simply goes to support that. We want to be part of a global community, and being at the south end of the world, there's a feeling of isolation down there. So thank you for having a global program for a start, Jerry, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. The one thing that I will always do is ensure that the children that come through our school have regularly this feeling of shining, that they are literally glowing and beaming, that they come to know that really, really well within themselves. And I encourage you to explore creativity and a bit of its theory, look to see what gaps in your own knowledge you have about it, and don't feel afraid to bucket yourself under that and use that term more frequently when you're describing what you're doing. Thank you.
I think we've got time for 1 or 2 questions, because we'll just run to 5 o'clock, which is dinner time, and we have one more presenter after this. So if we could take like 1 or 2 quick questions, if anybody has a question for Jane. Anybody? And she's going to be around for the you have one? Okay. Because she will be here for the rest of the conference.
So I will start out.
That's right.
That's okay. I will start out by just saying that when I say that I'm a master's student studying creativity and change leadership, I get the look. So
Yay.
I'm with you on making up. I said creatologist. You might find it online. She might have made it up. Mine's creativity evangelist. So I'm totally on board with what you're doing. And it was more that I wanted to express, and that I do believe that if everyone here, they are creative already, and it is a buzzword. That's also a...
That's okay.
That's okay, yep. Exactly. It is a buzzword, so when you can marry those, and even if people wanted to talk about that, I think if you and I could talk, we could talk to people, because it is something that others will connect to, especially right now. So
Yep.
the timing's right to use the word and to recognize your personal creativity is
Yep,
what I
agreed.
want to express.
Thanks. This was made at the beginning of last year, when we only had 10 or so families, I think. We've now got over 500 families on the books in 18 months. How good's that?
Is this how long is this section? Did you want to show this?
No, well, it's up to you. It just goes for maybe a minute and a half.
Oh, okay, because we might have another time we could actually show the rest
Sure.
of this at some point. Okay, thanks. Thank you. James and Don. On Saturday.
It's very short.
Yeah, it would be nice if we could show, if that's not everything, if we more, we could see more of it. But I think we have a place where that could happen. So our last mini talker today is Debra O'Rourke. Now, Debra has been a long-time AERO attendee and supporter, and has been also involved for a long time with the public alternative school movement in Toronto, Canada. So she'll tell you all about it. Debbie O'Rourke.
Minutes, no problem. I'll tell you all about it. Down? All righty, thanks. Is that better? Okay. Okay, thanks, Jerry. And thanks for including me at the last minute, because I didn't know if I'd make it out of Canada. And thanks for taking us on that great journey around Manhattan Island. It was astounding to me to see what it's like physically when we turned the corner around the north end of the island on the ship. I felt like I went back 10,000 years. And I thought about the indigenous people of this area, how beloved it has always been. And I just want to say thank you for allowing the rest of us to settle here. And I hope the best for all of us in our collaborations. We all know there's a lot of work to do. Canada's history and the alternative school movement is and in other ways is very similar to the US. We have the same challenges. Toronto has 40 alternative schools in its system, which might give you the feeling that it's a much better situation up there, but really Toronto's the only part of Canada that has a substantial number of alternative schools. Most cities have none. In terms of the democratic schools, Alpha and a school at the other end of the continent called Windsor House are the only ones I'm aware of that are elementary democratic schools. It's junior kindergarten to grade 8 in Alpha's case. Windsor House goes all the way to high school, and I've never visited it, and it's one of my dreams. We don't have much in the way of independent alternative schools, and I don't know why that is. I think it's probably in good part demographic, because we are fairly sparsely populated compared to the US, and there's just doesn't seem to be enough liberal-minded people in any given location who can afford also to pay school fees. So there could be cultural differences operating there as well, but I am really not sure. In addition to being involved with Alpha since 1985, I had 10 years as a parent, took 10 years off while I did other things I'll get to, and then 10 years as a staff member. I've also been involved in touring mainstream schools. And as an art educator, I do an art and science program. So I've worked in 20 schools with classes, with kids and teachers, 5-day programs. It always breaks my heart to leave them. Sometimes the teachers are so well-meaning that we'll bring an artist in, especially in these times when they think they've got to get every little scrap of curriculum out there. They're great teachers, but there are always things that make me really, really sad. Sometimes I begin thinking, why do I even bother with Alpha? You know, things can happen in the regular system, and then I see things that I see are breaking kids. I want to tell you a story about a thing that happens very often when, say, an artist visits a regular classroom. The kids start jumping around because they're so excited. And on one of my first projects, I lost a kid because the teacher immediately said, we're not going to have this during this project, you're in the office. So I lost that kid for the whole 5 days. So after that, whenever I started my little thing, you could always spot the kids, right? You can always spot the jumpers, the kids who are going to get sent out. So, you know, I'd say, like, hey, go get me some chalk. Hey, I left my bag over there. I'd find any little thing for a kid like that to do. And so they were able to stay with me through the project, and they often became my assistants. You know, an artist really needs an assistant, and someone on a production needs an assistant. So, and this one little fella, I just drew a picture of him. I don't know if you can see it from out there. Yeah, was really my right-hand person on one project, and he was amazing. We would do drawing plants, drawing animals. Kids would bring animals in. I'd bring my museum collection. And over that very intensive period, they would end up sewing a stuffed animal, and then we'd put them all into a landscape. We'd build a landscape at the very end. And this kid, while I was on a bulletin board creating the landscape for all their animals to go in, he was just the perfect assistant. When I was putting the cloth up to make the landscape, he could see where my hand was going to, and he knew I was making a hill, he knew I was running a river, and he always had his hand in the right spot to support me. I pointed out to his teacher at the end of that, I said, you know, he's so amazing, you know, and he did all this work with me. And she said, oh, I'm so happy he's getting a chance to shine because, you know, he's low. Yes, bright-eyed little incredibly competent problem solver, self-starter, was low. So he was, that's also about the age. He was about 8, I think. In Canada, we have the across-the-board compulsory exams too. We have one set at grade 3, one at grade 6. And I think the grade 3 exam is the greatest developmental travesty that, you know, boards that are very talented at doing developmental travesties. The grade 3 exam has to be one of the worst. You couldn't think of a worse time. So I'll talk about what we do at Alpha with kids in those kinds of developmental stages. Most of my work is with kids from K to 9, up basically K to age 4 to 9, up to grade 3. At Alpha, the kids, Alpha used to be in one little spot, one little room, our big room, I think, and the kids self-divided, basically, developmental. So when Alpha finally, when it got a school that had 2 floors, we had what we called the big kids and the little kids. And so we have 3 classrooms on each floor, basically, and the kids can go back and forth quite freely between each. And the younger group, there's a lot of play area, a lot of freedom to play. And what we find is that we also, some of the teachers who land on us don't know about this, but actually teachers in a free school work really hard. They're always coming up with ideas, and we know we have this deep, deep commitment to make sure our kids get the cool tools they need to get through life. So there's a deep commitment to literacy and numeracy. But at Alpha, a lot of kids have absorbed a lot of the material organically. They're quite willingly sitting down to write by the age of 8 or 9. But some of the kids are just starting. And those are kids who have been, like my little friend here, they're jumpy, they're active, and they have been so busy. They have been building, they have been making, they have been playing, they have been learning how to get along, and sometimes that's a big challenge for them. That's a good part of my job, is helping kids to learn to get along. It's like all free schools, like most of our schools, we use, what do you call it, restorative. We use restorative methods. I don't have to tell you what our method is. Everybody grows their own that's suitable to their culture. But Alpha is an active place, sometimes a chaotic place, because we are in a public school, we have public school restrictions, we don't have enough room for them. We're in the middle of a city. We don't have enough room for, everybody's kind of jammed. We can't let them go outside whenever they want to. So something you see at Alpha that you don't see that much, I think, in places like independent places like Albany or Summerhill, is you'll see a fair bit of chaos because some of the kids are running around. But you know, we make up rules to deal with that. The kids are involved in that rule making very much. The rules basically come from them. Anyway, a person, by the time a person would get to my friend's age, if he's not starting to want to actually read and write and do math, that's when we start kind of grabbing them and say, hey, you know, come on and work with us. You're a smart kid. You can learn this skill. And we learned to do that. Originally, Alpha would let them take as long as they took. And some of our kids learned to read at 10, just like in Summerhill sometimes. But what we learned, that was quite often a lot of those kids, it wasn't many. Most kids had really gotten on it, but the rare kid who took that long, they were secretly thinking they were stupid. And when someone's been secretly thinking they're stupid for 4 years, it affects the personality. And we have teachers now who've been involved with anti-oppressive education and training. We've been reading our COSAL. So we start kind of buttonholing them around a certain age and getting them to sit down and getting them to master that thing that we know they can master. So we get family needs to do that. The report cards exist, unfortunately, but nobody cares about them. And they're non-judgmental. Nobody cares about them. They're just, we do them to do them because we have to. So I'm going to make some recommendations for some things that can be done now to ease the suffering in the system. But those of us who work on schools are doing important work. I know Alpha sometimes get accused of being elitist. I mean, we let everybody in, and the huge reason we're public is so that everybody could come. But we're accused of elitism because we're so wrapped up in our school. And we even get told by the board, I mean, this is one thing, you know, as I give advice about how people can just help make their classes a little better, you know, really beware of co-option of our terms. We've actually been told, well, look at all our documents. We're already doing what Alpha does. You know, you don't have to be so self-protective. You don't have to be so, you know, let go of your little ideology a little bit, your little hippie ideology. But in fact, it's not happening. There are kindergarten kids who are being lectured for not being self-regulating. What's our job? Anyway, the things that I think can happen now, that can start anytime, anywhere, is cooperative classrooms. And this touches on you know, a lot of the stuff people have been talking about today. Kids, little kids in school together, one of the biggest things they do is help each other. The helping impulse is huge. They're proud that they can do something. They're proud that they can help somebody. And kids are much more eager to learn from another kid than they are to learn from an old gal like me. So every classroom has mentors. And like, can't you just see the geniuses in the system saying, oh, all your kids are also teachers. You can now have a 40-to-1 ratio. So again, beware of co-option, because of course we matter. Our role modeling matters. Us being not overwhelmed, being able to actually be patient and to do all those techniques that we have learned for mediation and bringing people along, that's very important. The ratios are toxic, and they ensure that whatever ideology is top of the mound currently in public schooling is going to fail. Public schooling goes from authoritarian to progressive. It never gets all the way to democratic. It couldn't do that. But it goes between the ideologies, and they always fail, so there's always a backlash, and nothing still changes. So it is structural, and we can never stop working on that. But within the classroom, we've got cooperative learning, conversational. The kids can move around, the kids can talk. I wonder if the research has been done in mainstream classes about how much of the talk that happens in classrooms is on topic. I remember when I went to school, when we chatted between each other, we were actually trying to help each other most of the time. But what do they call that in mainstream classes? Anyone? When cheating, yeah, they call that cheating. When we practice our ethics and help each other, it's called cheating. Well, that's how human beings got here, was by cooperation. Competition has its place in nature for sure, but in human life, cooperation is what gets us our water, our food, our shelter, everything that's important. So to not take that away from kids when they're 4 is the best way to make sure these kind of things happen. Don't steal it when they're 4, and you don't have to worry about how to put it back or give it back to them. It all adds up to non-judgmental education, which is something a little trickier for teachers in mainstream classes to practice. But if we know that it's a game, if we know the exams are a game, the report cards are a game, we can kind of share that with the kids. You know, we can say, well, you know, you got to do this, and let's all help each other try to get through this. But what really matters is that, you know, what we're doing here from day to day. And a lot of that has to do with the restorative nature of a classroom. Mainstream classroom can be restorative, and of course, nonviolent communication is one technique that has been spreading around. And there are many, and you can grow your own. You can read around, grow your own. Nature is really important. One thing that tells me there are evil geniuses in the upper echelons of education is the fact that in Ontario, there is almost nothing about animals in the curriculum until grade 4. I think there might be 1 unit or something. All the science is taught in little tiny sections that have nothing to do with each other, and they're little things you have to go through. Almost nothing about animals. And from being with kids around that age for all these years, I know it's a rare kid who's not crazy for them, and there's a reason for that. That's what we had to learn for our million years of existence. We had to learn about the animals, the plants, the land we were on. We had to learn how to get by there. So that curiosity we're born with it. By grade 4, kids have started to kind of move on. They should have already absorbed a lot of that stuff. So it's, I think it's an evil genius that keeps that out of the curriculum. At Alpha, we have a way I kind of brought my art and science stuff to Alpha was with another teacher, I started a museum. So we have quite a collection of natural objects. Depending on the enthusiasm of the teachers of the day, we have animals. We tend to try to get the scariest animals, the snakes, the lizards, the insects. I'm big on insects because the partnership between the plants and insects is what allows us to survive. So, and they're the most maligned and poisoned animals, and poisoning them poisons us. So we bring a lot of that in at the early age. Well, the kids bring it in, right? You can hardly keep that out of a classroom if you actually let the kids, bring their interests in. So that's really important. Multi-age grouping. That would be a real challenge in the regular system to try to get that one through. But it is important, so I have to acknowledge that. The ratios of the adults to learners is really important, as much for the moral modeling as for the actual attention you give to children. All kids need adult attention. Sometimes I find, and it's not linear, one reason I love working with the young ones is they actually want to talk to me, they want to bring stuff to me. I don't believe in forcing myself on kids, so I'm not so great at working with the kids who are, say, 10, 11, 12. But what I find is that their need of you, actually, they really need you. And then, like, by about 9, certainly at Alpha, they tend to be the really, really balanced people. It's about as balanced as you're going to be till you're really old, I think, is when you're 9. And then they get thrown off by those pre-adolescent hormones, but then they start to need you again too. Like, they really need your attention when you're giving you the worst time of your life. So they need attention, but they also need us to not be worn out and stressed and worried about being on the right page of the curriculum. And one thing that all of us with our schools that we are doing our very important work and need to do is try to create solidarity with our public school compadres on getting rid of the toxic enemies of learning. And they've been mentioned today several times, so I can just, like the homework in the early grades, again, can we say developmentally inappropriate, ladies and gentlemen? Developmentally inappropriate. When I was visiting schools, I've seen an hour a day wasted on collecting homework in the morning and, like, where's your homework, little person? I'm a fairy. That's the level they're at. They're all of a sudden, they're flying through the universe, and then all of a sudden, like, what page, huh? And then, of course, the mass compulsory testing. I think I cover that pretty good with my little friend here. And the detailed stratified curricula. Is there anything that teaches that learning is boring better than a detailed stratified curriculum? My first experience in teaching actually was as a parent not knowing what to do in this wonderful free school I'd found for my kid, and a kid put up her hand at meeting and said, let's start a dinosaur club. So, okay, I'll be your resource person. So I was their resource person every week for almost 4 years until they fired me. They learned all they could from me. And I moved on to working with special needs kids. But we covered everything. You go to one place in science, the questions will take you every place else. You go from dinosaurs to anatomy, geology, cosmology, and the kids start talking about God, and I don't say nothing. I just let them talk about it. So you go anywhere. Deeply philosophical conversations with very, very young people. They're trying to figure it out. And in Jade's talk, I heard the magic that happens when people are able to be people in a school and be creative in a school. We do experience that at Alpha, and that is worth the fight. What doing this work with kids has taught me, and with their parents, that's actually been my main job at Alpha, has been volunteer coordinator, they call it, but I work with the youngest kids and their parents to learn how to be together democratically. And I learned that learning starts where we are. So when I gave those different points that one can do in a classroom, you can start with whatever you see is needed and go out from there. There's no single point to start doing these changes that we need to do. Learning starts where you are. So that's it for me, Jerry. Thanks very much. Sure, sure. So I did tell it all in 20 minutes. Okay. Do you want this? Sure.
So my question will be, for me, I'm from Argentina. I know like lots of different alternative schools, public and private, in every part of Latin America. For me, it's quite interesting that you have like alternative public schools, and I wanted to know what are the difficulties, you have had in the past for that, in making it happen, you know, with the selection of the teachers, for example. That's a huge deal in Latin America, because public schools, you cannot choose your teachers. And how is the relationship with the Ministry of Education or Secretary of Education or of the, I don't know which is called, the organization that rules your work? Yes, you cover some things, but I wish if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, on that subject, the special thing about Toronto's model of education is that alternative schools are proposed by communities of parents and teachers. So I didn't catch all of Jamal's talk, but his talk about the importance of parents politically is what's made the difference for us in Toronto, for sure. Because the ministry and the city anyway, the school board seems to be reluctant to totally crush something that all the parents want. But it took a lot of work for each of these schools to be created. It was a process of about a year or two where people met and figured out their common ground and put in their proposals to the public schools. When your school exists, what we find is that there was, from the beginning, most of the administration just wanted it to go away. They thought the parents would lose energy and would go away. And if the parents go away, they can control the teachers, no problem. So there were visionary administrators and politicians that supported the alternative schools in the beginning, but they were few and far between. But they had a strength around 1970 that opened a door that stayed open for almost 50 years now. But it's by communities, parents and teachers keeping that door open. In Toronto, our biggest problem is that the policies, because the administration doesn't want to recognize that we exist, there's no policy support. So for hiring teachers, for instance, it's very quick, mechanical, fast and dirty in the Board of Education. It's a 5-day advertisement, 5-day interview period, you hire someone. So our parents find ways. The partnership with the teachers is strong, so when they see an opening coming, the parents get into motion and they advertise on the website to gather interested people, inform any interns or supply teachers, substitute teachers who they think might be interested in getting. So the main thing is to get a strong, long list by getting the word out to interested people far enough ahead of time so they can look for the opening. Our teachers always have to be from within our board existing, because our board it always seems to be shrinking. Hiring new teachers, we're working with an existing pool, but I find there's a lot of interested people if you can get the word out and find them. Another big challenge is like our teachers are numbers, our kids are numbers, our principals are even numbers. They get moved every 5 years. And usually someone just lands at Alpha, and usually it's a first-year principal. They share Alpha with another local school that actually needs them. So often we don't see much of them, and that's a good relationship. You know, they can come to our parties, come to the odd meeting, and be there to support us when we needed. And that's how it was for the first 20 years. We had very supportive principals, but that situation changed with globalization. The principal role was kind of rewritten. Communities still expect them to support the schools, and they're supposed to keep the parents happy, but they're mainly enforcers of legislation. So if a principal, one of the worst things that happens to us, and it happens periodically, is that a new principal decides to make brownie points by bringing Alpha into line. We were the second alternative school in our board, so we're the pioneering elementary, and we're still quite democratic. So boy, they want, you can make big points by bringing Alpha under control. So that's always a difficult time. But through those struggles, we find that's also how you find the allies in the administration find us. And usually at some point, we've lost some things. We've lost some battles, but we always find ways to kind of recover. But we find people in the administration who will give us advice about how to survive because they want us to, because there are a few people there. And so at least we've been crippled, we've been hamstrung, we've been challenged, but we ain't been killed yet. So, and now that the system is in such, the schools are getting bad enough that a lot of parents are looking for alternatives. So when people are starting new schools and we have waiting lists, they can't kill us dead just now. So I hope it helps a little.
One more question? Anybody?
Have you and your school had contact with Cory Doctorow, who's an author who went to Seed School, and he actually talks about it quite a lot, but where he says, you know, that he had very free reign to do what he wanted, you know, and study what he was interested in, and that helped him, you know, like, that helped him become a writer.
Yeah.
Because he, you know, so he talks about it, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone from Seed at an AERO conference. And, you know, he's occasionally talked about the difficulties.
Right. Yeah, I know of him. I'd like to interview him sometime. He was part of the early years of Seed, which was a high school, which was the very first alternative school. And it's kind of an interesting story. Like, Seed was a summer project to deal with unemployed teenagers, because there was a shortage of summer jobs. And the school board was asked to find something for kids to do, and some volunteer teachers helped to set it up. And the kids came, and the kids took it over. The high school students took it over. And after 2 years of summer program and a winter conference, they went to the board and they asked for the first alternative school in the system. They said, we want a full-time free school for a high school. We want Seed. And I don't think Cory was in that very, very first bunch, but he was in on the early days when Seed was very much a free school. And there were a few famous people associated with Seed. One was Marshall McLuhan. I think that's one reason our alternative schools got off the ground, was people like Marshall McLuhan and some prominent writers and journalists were really on side to help it. And by the time, after a few years, like, it had momentum, and we were able to keep going. But I'd like to meet him sometime. Yeah.
Okay, everybody, I want to thank Debbie O'Rourke and all of our mini talkers today. I think that it was a very, very interesting process, and hopefully we learned some things.